questions live. So if you do have any, please don't try to wait. Just post it. You might have to wait till that exact specific position is finished, but we will cover that. And by all means, ask away. We don't know what you guys don't know.
So I'm posting my old drafting guide there on the side. Some of the stuff is a little bit antiquated because it was from Saucy, but a lot of it still holds up, and we are going to use some of it throughout the point of the lesson today, just to kind of go over reading battle games and then learning to figure out what I have to be looking for while I'm drafting a team. And normally I'll also have it there and have it open and suggest some of you have it open because it means you'll have access to some of the lingo that I may end up using that may or may not be acquainted with some of you, or some of you may or may not be acquainted with. But otherwise, it should be a fun class. Drafting is a real fun part of the game that really doesn't get awarded, and it's kind of underappreciated. Speak of the devil, and he shall appear. Senor Rook.
I made it.
You did.
Sorry, I was running late.
I was sitting there thinking, it's like he's either doing work shit or he's hanging out with Alice. One of the two.
Nah. I'm trying to fight for democracy and for freedom right now. And
fucker's playing Helldivers too. God damn it, even worse. You know what? In fairness, I'm also down to play Helldivers. I also want to play Helldivers after this.
Yeah, later.
Let the man.
So,
look, man, I wanted a game too.
Did you guys already start? Did I miss anything?
Nope, we're about to start now.
Yet. We're about to.
Yep. So we're gonna go over, just for like a basic. We're gonna go over basics of drafting, understanding what to draft and when. So like knowing to draft for the game, knowing how to figure out how to build it like a core of your team. So likely the way we'll do it. And also we'll probably be taking questions as well. So Rook, if you are welcome to chime in for answers because I trust your word on drafting. Well, I'm better than my own at this fucking point, but the big thing is I want folks to understand that there's plenty of resources for this. And you could come to me and Lyle whenever, and I'm sure Eric will answer your questions if you need them. That dude is a repository of fucking information. So put your messages in the side chat if you have any questions. But we'll probably get started in the next minute or so.
For the four of us, make sure we all. I'm ready. I think Cid, are you?
Yep. As ready as I'll ever be.
Rook, what about you?
Yeah, I'm all set. Where do you guys want to start?
Cid, I think already had a plan for that. Leo, are you ready?
Recording started, I think.
Recording, by the
way.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear that part. Okay. Well then, so everybody, let's do this. Welcome to drafting with what? The Battle Master chat?
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, we really got to workshop that. Cid, this is really your forte. Like, you got your 10th because of your ability to draft. So where are we starting?
Well, we'll start where most things do, at the beginning. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Kingdom of Neverwinter's, I guess, one and only podcast when it comes to battle gaming, both big and small, topics big and small, understanding the macro and micro of the game. I'm your host, Battlemaster Cid. I'm joined here by the newly minted Sir Lyle Raker and good friend from Tides, arguably probably one of our up-and-coming battle gamers in Rook with a K. So, gentlemen, give your introductions first before we actually get into the topic of today's lesson. So I guess, Lyle, since you're the newly minted knight, you go first.
You gave it away for me, man. That is Sir now of battle. So like, I think there's not much more to say.
Fair enough. Monsieur Rook, give an introduction to who you are, like some of your qualifications, how people may know you, and some of the stuff that you do.
What up? I'm Rook. I like the battle game. I play chess. I game more than anything else. I think like my biggest influence, I think for battle gaming has honestly been just playing like Overwatch, Marvel Rivals. I think there's a lot you can learn from like team-based games that aren't specifically Amtgard that still carry over into this. But yeah, that's where I come from.
Yep, and I come from a similar background. For those of you who don't know me, Battlemaster Cid. I come from a very similar background to Eric on that. I play a lot of Counter-Strike, Dota, League of Legends, Marvel Rivals, Overwatch. A lot of those games kind of have a lot of overlap with tactics when it comes to drafting, understanding like deploying utility, and knowing how to kind of play around teammates and playing around the opposing team. So it's a kind of a skill set that really translates well from online gaming to our little game right here. So, topic of today going to be drafting. So before we go any further with drafting, let's kind of explain the basic idea of how this works. Just because we might have out of kingdom listeners, we might have people who don't know how drafting works and they're completely new to this whole thing. So let's go over it. Drafting is defined as, and to kind of quote like pretentious essayist, it's generally the idea that you are picking teams by either picking players one by one, or in the way that we do so in the Kingdom of Neverwinter, it's traditionally one person picks two, or one of the captains picks two, and the other player picks one, alternating until all teams are picked, and the game begins. Simple enough, not particularly hard to figure out. Now, drafting in itself is probably one of the hardest skills that you can pick up on, because it requires you to both understand the game you're playing, the terrain you're playing on, the players in the pool, the players that can be picked, as well as what exactly you are able to do and what you're playing. So it's a skill set that is important to pick up, and you probably should learn if you wish to pursue battle as a path. And I highly recommend that you go over guides, look over what your players do generally, and kind of like see what most people play, what's like the class diversity of most of your kingdom games, or even your own local like park games. But the idea here is that you want to do research, and it's probably the most research intensive. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you're sitting there poring over books, but it's something you generally want to kind of keep an eye on. You have to be a little bit more active over it than other aspects of this game. So, with that, right.
I was gonna say, so with that being said, let's start with what is drafting,
Mhm.
which you kind of touched base on. But with that, let's go into the fairest way and the worst way, and maybe some early game tips, like the immediate. What's the first thing I should be thinking about?
First thing that you go over when a draft happens, and Eric, I want you to chime in
If
on
I
this as
may.
well. Yeah.
Yeah. So like the first thing that I kind of asked myself is like, well, before even getting the question, we can objectively say that a team full of sword knights and battle knights is probably going to do a lot better than against a team of first timers. I think we all know that, right? Let's just draw the extreme for a moment so that when we talk about specifically like, where different players' skill levels are at, just knowing the people you work with is going to give you that advantage. And one sort of benefit that I have of being someone who's a fighter, I kind of have an idea of where a lot of people's like fighting skill are, right? Whether they're, really fucking good or really not. Like, it's not. It's not like I'm not here to critique anyone, but like I need to know like who am I picking before like I have you on my team. It's one thing to have someone who has 6 points of armor, but if you don't know how to swing a sword, it's not really worth as much. Now, that being said, having like having an inexperienced, let's say like 4 Orders of the Warrior, you know, 6 point paladin is probably gonna equal out versus someone who's like a warlord or a sword knight who's just playing peasant, right? It's like, the equipment that the people you have on your team matters, but also the experience that your front line has is also going to be important. And I'm not really touching too much on the casters right now. I'm really just talking about like who do you have that's going to be like keeping your team alive, keeping your team anchored, and like how well can they hold that front line? So like first thing that I do when I'm picking teams, first I try to pick who's going to be like my best sword and board, just anyone with a shield that is just going to stay alive. Like it's one thing if you have someone who's like a great fighter or a great flanker, that's awesome, but like you need the person who's just not gonna fucking move. Someone who's just gonna be the center of your team, who you're kind of gonna build around, right? So it's not always just one person, especially in kingdom battles. Like the game is so big that there's a lot of different people on the team that are contributing. So you kind of need like 3 or 4 sword and borders that are just your front line. Doesn't matter what class, doesn't matter what enchantments you decide to put on them. Doesn't even matter the armor on them. You just need a couple people who are just in the front, staying that line. Yeah. And what
So
were you gonna say?
let me ask you this, Rook. Are you saying then if I had to pick, and I have a flow, a sword and board, a great, and a one-handed okay caster,
Mhm.
or actually we'll change that one for a bow because we're trying not to go too much
Yeah,
into
yeah. Not even
spoilers.
magic yet.
So you have a bow. Are you saying that out of those essentially 4, the most important is your sword and board?
Yeah, for me, I always pick the sword and board first.
Sid, would you agree to that?
It depends on the game mode. So the way I look at it is a little bit different. I kind of tether my drafts to what the game mode asks of me. If
Very fair.
a good majority of the time, Rook has the correct answer on this, because most times you need to be able to take and hold space, and Sword and Board is your guys for that.
Yep.
Those are your anchor units. Those, whether they're armored, unarmored, or just like stalwart players who understand like how to take space effectively with very little risk. Like those tend to be what I'm focusing on first. Those guys tend to be a lot of sword and borders. I know like Goose in it, like when he was really, really pushing on healer, was definitely one of those people I was wanting to pick up if I could, just because he was good at it. We really couldn't dislodge him without a lot of effort. You couldn't really like do much around it, and he was guaranteed to take space with little to no issue. Same idea comes up with actually taking like Rook now, Chop, some of these other guys who are like physically gifted fighters, but don't take this to mean that it is something to say that, yeah, you just want those gifted fighters like your high ordered warrior guys. What you want is that you're picking the guy for the right job that you need. Not every guy
So
is going to be, not every skilled warrior is going to fit the job you need. And for anchor, you want somebody who's got a lot of patience, a lot of understanding about counterattacking and counter pushing, and has the mental to keep a line in check until you need to make a push. So
Yeah.
all that, a
um,
lot of that is intangibles.
so first off, I want to make sure everybody knows that is Sir Goose the Warlord.
Yes.
Um, for those that don't recognize the name Goose. Um, so when you hear he's holding these lines and holding that, you have a better idea of why. Um, Second, so if we're saying generally here, right? We're just gonna say big open field, team A versus team B, mutual annihilation, um, or just a very generalized idea. Let's not try to get too specific because I know most of anybody who's going to bother to listen to this probably already has an idea that you should pick for the game itself and not for, well, here's all my general tips. And Lyle and Cid and Rook said to do this every time. And no, please let's make those changes for the games themselves. We're not going to be able to help you at the time every time.
Yep.
Um, so
I mean, you could
we're
just call
saying,
me.
Mhm.
I mean,
Hey,
some
hey,
of them
Rook, I'm
can.
picking people. Who do I pick? I don't know.
I don't know. Put me on FaceTime. Let me look at
Let me
them.
FaceTime.
um,
Pick the guy
so
with the flail.
most
It's the NFL draft of battle game drafts. You just got like it's just Eric on the fucking phone with a FaceTime. It's like this
oh,
man is
that
trying to
gives me an
enjoy the
idea.
lunch with his fucking friends right now, and they're calling him up from a fucking event out in the Midwest. Sorry. Yeah.
So for generally, we're saying sword and board should be uh your number one pick. We're not saying every single person should be your number one pick, but you should definitely get yourself a good solid board or two.
Yep.
I think
Yeah.
I can speak for all of us, but just in case, that for a second one, I would go with a pole to back
Yeah.
up that front line.
Yep. A good wing is
I can
always
agree
good
with that.
for an anchor. Yep.
If the sword and board's your shield, your pole arms and your grates are definitely going to be your swords, for lack of a better term. um, is there any thoughts there on what we should look for? Maybe should we be looking for great swords or pole arms? What
No,
do you,
yeah, I think generally, like, if anyone here has been on a ditch field before, and everyone on the ditch field, we start out with a couple sword and boards, we cut a couple people going flow, maybe someone going single sword because they like to talk about how much better they are, so they go single sword, right? Whatever the field looks like, the moment one person brings out a pole, you're gonna see this every time. Is now someone on the other team says, "Fuck, I'm gonna get my pole." I don't know if I can curse. I'm gonna get my pole because now I have to beat that guy with the pole. So now you got two poles on the field, and then someone gets stabbed a little too hard, and they say, "All right, I'm getting sick and tired of these poles. I'm gonna bring my 10-foot pole now." And then now it's anarchy now. I
It's the
look,
nuclear proliferation effect, pretty
we
much.
yeah, we have a lot of falling fire people. I think you all understand what it's like to have a lot of poles on the field. Like, I think just about everyone on your team, or I guess in your park, has a pole at their house. Um,
some of us have
and
more than one.
Yep.
yeah, most people more than one, exactly. And like, you don't even necessarily need to be that effective with it. Like, just the fact that you have a tool that can control that much space, that you don't even need to be that experienced with it, you get a one free shot on someone before they can even respond, before they're even within range of you. Like, you're able to push them back. So, like, right, and going back to like what we were talking about with the sword and board, like, the reason I picked sword and board is because now, like, if you have a pole paired with a sword and board, that pole just got 3 times stronger. If it's by itself, it's nothing. Like, and again, we're gonna go back to, if you're doing a one-on-one versus someone, right? A pole by itself is just worthless. It's gonna lose majority of its fights. Not to make this about too much sword fighting, but like, when I was in a tournament recently, a Dutchy level tournament, I fought maybe 4, 5 different people in brackets who were all going great weapon, and I had a small shield, block out the pole, step in, and just get
Run
an
them
easy
down.
kill. That's it. But if you have someone next to you, like a sword and border, or even a Florentine person, someone who's short range that can answer those types of threats for you, your pole is going to be worth a lot more. So I always pick whoever has the biggest pole, I want you on my team. Whoever has sword and board, I need you on my team. Like, those are my priorities. Now, once I feel like, okay, like, I've got a sufficient front line, and like, I feel comfortable with like who I have at that point, that's when we start talking about, okay, well, now we can say, well, what type of casters do we need? What type of range do we need? Um and
So
yeah, go
since
ahead.
you're touching on casters and ranged, that what wouldn't it be number three? At this point, we have our flow fighters, which there's an argument of how you could use them. I'll let you figure out whichever way they would be used, and your bowmen. So out of the two that are left, who are we saying would be what should be your third pick?
So now this is the point in drafting where I look at, what do we have so far? I'm going to look at the enemy team, I'm going to look at my team, and I'm going to look at what's left, and I'm going to kind of make a decision at that point. So, at the last mid reign, we had a day battle, or what am I saying? We had a battle game where it was a castle siege, and I see there's a bunch of bow and arrows on that have not been picked yet, and like, everyone on my team is like, "Rook, you got to pick the archers, bro. You got to pick the archers." I don't think I picked a single archer that day.
You didn't.
I
I
gave
know the
all
game we're
the
talking
archers
about. You
to
did
the
not.
enemy team. Yeah, I didn't. I gave the whole enemy team all the archers. Everyone has a bow. I'm playing healer, and because I was playing healer, I'm playing warder. I get to just throw protection from projectiles on every single frontline person that didn't have a shield. And everyone who did have a shield, why do they care about the archer? They're going to get legged and get healed after anyways. Like that's an easy in that situation, right? In that build that I was preparing for, like having more archers on enemy team was more of a benefit because we get to shut them down. Now the enemy team is effectively has less people on the team because there's less people that can do anything. So what was originally like a well-balanced team for them totally got shut down because of that. In a normal game, let's say militia, the less sword and borders that are on the other team, the more valuable bow and arrow becomes. The less people that can shut down your archers by just having a shield in their hand, the easier it becomes for them to have an effect on the field. So archers break weapons. So anyone with a pole, they have a major threat. Anyone who's going Florentine, that's a great target, right? So like this is a moment where now like I want more archers because these archers are not just going to be taking legs on people, but like now I'm threatening to break every single pole arm on the enemy team's weapon. Now I'm threatening to anyone who's going Florentine, one injury on them and like they're in a really bad spot.
If I can chime in on this,
Yeah.
I love the way that you bring it up for Archer because Archer, much like a polearm, is a support's weapon. Now, what I mean by that is that you're taking a weapon set that is specifically there to force multiply what your line fight can do. And what you'll see with a lot of really good archers, and most of you who've ever seen like some of the short form content that Daga here, Belagarth, and some of these other games put out, is that their archers tend to play really close to their line, almost right behind their linemen. Most of our experienced bell fighters here can probably attest to this as well. Their job at that point is they're peeking in between the line, they're dipping, dodging, and weaving with the specific intent of making that fight uneven. Casters do this too in our game, but the reason why I mention archers specifically is because archers can do so with a lot less risk to themselves and can do so from a lot of weird angles that a caster may not always be able to get to. And it's really interesting to kind of pick around it that way, especially whether it be militia games or in class games. You see a heavy amount of poles picked on a team. If you have the ability to take archers, especially archers that you know are well suited and can or take directions well for choosing targets, like saying, "Hey, I'm going to need you to be on those pole arms. Hey, I'm going to need you to maybe like start sniping out those archers when they start coming in." Regardless of the fight.
As I think the person who can take claim of the only master archer in here, and I know at least one person's going to try to argue with me later, but she's not allowed until she gets a couple more battles. I will say that an archer is one of the most wide variety of ability power that they can provide. You know, as Cid was just going over, you have the ability to dodge and weave, and if you are doing that right, you might be slapping your bow and arrow into somebody's butt as you're trying to draw. Now, I am also incapable of doing that kind of play style myself, because my knees will give out if the second I try the second dodge. I get one, but two, I'm done. And then I'm injured on the field, and I don't want to be evacuated out. So I will play that archer as backline, and I would take archers that can do that as well. When you're drafting, take an idea of the person you're picking.
Yep.
We've talked on this a few times already. You know, I am a bigger dude. If you've ever seen me here, everybody in this room should know, at least currently, I'm 300 plus pounds. If I'm standing next to Rook and he's decided to pick up a bow today, do you want the guy who's going to stand behind the line by about 20 feet firing over your shoulder, or the guy who can stand and outrun you and anybody else around? Because Rook here can do that. At least compared to me, he can. I don't know how fast you really are, bud. But
I'm not
still,
that good of a shot, first off. Like even if I had a bow.
right. Even at 5 feet, he's going to miss. But
Yeah.
still, you could still do the dodge and weave thing that I can't do.
Yeah.
the idea ends up becoming that when you're looking at building your core, and Eric put it, or Rook put it in a really good way, is that you are building up from the bottom. You need good support and you need good foundation for a team. That's your sword and boards. You then want your struts, your walls. And by that, it's normally your wings. So in that case, the way that I use that term is traditionally to mean a support unit for either armored players, shielded players, etc. This is what your pole arms are traditionally used for. Sometimes casters can kind of fall into that, but we'll get to that when we get to them. Bows can kind of also fall under this kind of idea, as they're supporting a larger unit of players as they choose to try and take space. But the idea here is that you are trying to build this little picture, this little unit that fits well to what your class can do and what you can do with your class, and execute on it. Because picking up a hodgepodge of people that you know are good fighters, sure, doesn't always mean it's going to equate to success. Not every person is always going to be on the same page. Not every person you know is going to be like well suited to every battle game. It's about figuring out what you have it. So to go back, at least to bring this point, or I guess this tangent, full circle, it's understanding your core, building your core, but also researching what you have on field. Look at the people you traditionally see. If they're people you know, and you've seen out on Kingdom Fields a lot, then you know more or less what the repertoire is. Sure, you'll have a curveball every now and again, like the guys who've been playing Peasant every now and again in our kingdom just to mess around, or like people who are playing off class, which has been happening a little bit more recently. Like the funnier ones are like, oh yeah, me playing armor. Sure, dude. Like I'm not going to be useful to your team comparatively if I were playing caster. But again, keep an eye out. What is this person traditionally good at? How does this person help me build that core unit that I'm trying to build up? That's the big thing that I want to kind of bring up into this. So we've now got our bows, we've got our our boards, we've got our poles. Where are we going next here, gentlemen?
Go ahead,
I
Rook.
think people who work well together is also something worth bringing up. I've seen what it looks like when two people who normally work well together are separated, and I think last weekend at the day battle is a great example of where people who work well together are put together. So I've been put on the field where like I put Varg and Oryx on opposing teams, and like neither of them really had that like standout moment that they normally have. And I've had days where like I see them paired together, and like these guys have such an influence on the field that like they are just integral to their team's success. One goes pole, the other goes sword and board. They know how to communicate with each other. Like those are people that you usually want to keep together. And then the opposite side is true, where like if I see the enemy team is picking one, like, well, wait, I don't want to give you that advantage. Like I'm gonna pick the other because I kind of want to keep them separated if it means you don't get what you want.
Yep.
So
Understanding the opposing draft.
yeah, understanding like what the opposing team is doing, like what their kind of goal is when they're picking is important. At the last day battle, if you guys saw my team, it was myself, Articus, Fable, Haru, and Eli. And the way that we were coordinating our team, I practice with with Articus every week. Tuesdays, Sundays, we're always on the same team. Like we know how to work with each other. Like that is what we were focused on our team, is like whatever Articus is doing, like I'm going to be supporting him in one way or another, whether it's directly behind him, whether it's he's flanking and I'm drawing someone's attention. Like I'm always playing off of him because I know how to work with him. And then the other three on our team, we had Elidibus, Haru, and Fable. Now, Eli and Fable, I know that they go to the same park. They practice with each other. They're regularly working with each other. Like, without them directly telling me what type of relationship they have, I already know you guys know how to work with each other. I want to keep you two together. So we put them two coupled with Fable. Fable works as our anchor because, like, maybe she doesn't
Oh,
know how to, like, directly
hey, Rook,
communicate with them. Yeah.
you had talked to that. You said Fable goes to Falling Fire. I
Haru and
just to
Elidibus.
just
Yeah.
to clear that
Sorry.
up. That's
Thank you.
Heru, not Fable. That
I Yeah, my
that
bad.
just for
Heru
those that
goes to
don't.
Falling Fire. Eli and Heru work together. Fable being sort of our middle ground between the two of us, or the two groups of us. We had her paired up with Heru and Eli because where Articus is more of a flanker and, like, I'm gonna be helping him flank, putting more numbers on our anchor and our center of the field is what was helping us a lot more. So this was kind of like what our game plan was. And I can't take all the credit for this. This is all Chop's idea. He came up with it and this is what we ran with. Um yeah, I
So
mean, again, just
I
I
was
want to throw this in too because it's important that this is going to sound mean to Rook a little bit. We are
that's
talking
okay.
about drafting, and that particular game was one where you got to set up your team ahead of time.
yeah.
Um, this is a very big difference between what you will normally get. You know, in a game where you're
Right.
drafting, you and the co-captain or co-captains for all the others are standing there, and you're picking out 1, 2, 4, whatever. Whereas that particular game allowed you to set up your exact team ahead of time, so you could come in with all your strategies for weeks in advance.
The big thing to come from with that, and I guess the learning experience we can take from it for drafting, it's that even if you're not allowed like your perfect setup, so to speak, you're given the opportunity here to understand. Okay, hey, my anchor doesn't always have to be a warrior or a paladin, an anti-paladin. It can be a monk. It can be a barbarian, and it doesn't always mean that my wing always has to be a polearm. Sometimes, in this case, it's our druid. The idea, like, is that these are slots and like spots that you're putting people into because that's the job that you need them to fit in the line. Now, mind you, when you're looking at this from the actual drafting perspective, it's like saying, okay, well, I've got an entire field of people, what, maybe 40 or so, give or take, on our kingdom fields, maybe 50, if it's a
Yeah.
real like busy game or busy day. So,
So,
hmm,
so let's touch base a little bit because we're talking about casters now,
okay.
and we're getting more and more, and I think we should go ahead and bring them into this conversation. So let's start off with out of the 4 casters. At the time of this video, that is the druid, the healer, the bard, and then a wizard. Um, when you are choosing which caster to pick, whether it's bard over healer or wizard over druid, or however you want, um, what would be your priorities? And let's start with you, Sid.
It depends on game mode, and it's going to vary by local meta. Um, just a little bit of, I guess, the explanation as to why I say that is that I've traveled and played in what 3 different kingdoms now, and I've played against maybe about 10 or 11 kingdoms worth of different metas, whether that be Emerald Hills, Wetlands, CK, Rising Winds, Polaris, Crystal Groves. We've had a few guys I've played against. All of them play this game very differently. All of their fields are going to be completely different. Their metas are going to be completely different. The class compositions that you'll see on a field are going to be completely different. So that means that caster, that go-to that you want, isn't just determined on what you have in game at the time or what you have on the field, but also what the game is asking you to do. Yeah, if somebody says it's a mutual annihilation game, yes, I'm going to put more of a premium on those healers because that's what's going to drag that game out. That those are going to be my guys making sure that this meat grinder keeps going. If it's a game where I'm allowed to kind of play a little bit wider and kind of like focus a little bit more on taking space and forcing the team to have to reliably respond to my nonsense, maybe I put more of a premium on druid, meaning that like I can put out smaller stacks of like enchantments that can kind of force the opposing team to kind of have to deal with it and force them to burn those very precious dispels early. Maybe I want to work on getting a core of a healer and a bard together. So I want to maybe pick out one first, then get the other, because I maybe only know. Because in Neverwinter we don't really have that many battery bard players. Leo, Amalga, and there's maybe like another 2 or 3 that come to mind. And that's kind of a premium for game modes that kind of require that level of like being able to keep resources topped off as much as you can. Now, finally, going into, I guess, the last section when it comes to casters, it's understanding what that caster, especially when you're prioritizing it, what does the setup look like? So if the game mode is short relatively in terms of respawn time, so like sub 30 seconds, 60 from death, or anything like that, where am I, like, is that ice ball going to be useful? Oh, hell yes. But the problem is that they're also just going to take the death, realistically speaking. So sure, you turn ice ball into a kill spell. Absolutely. But at that point, if I can take the objective quicker by just, I don't know, taking a bunch of bards and losting people, or tearing, or one of the more interesting tactics I've seen with like VIP games is where people take up agoraphobia, and if the VIP isn't immune, you just force them to be away from their team. So you can do
All right.
absolutely like a bunch of different things, but it's look over what the game is asking for you, look at what the kind of build up that you have on the field, and then make according like their decisions, because every caster has so much that they bring to a table. Sorry, it's kind of a long-winded answer to that.
Rook, what would you say? Sorry, Sid, I'm going to cut you off there because I want to get his opinion too.
Mhm.
Would you agree? Would you disagree? Tell me your thoughts.
I mean, I do agree that it's you know it's flexible. There's a lot of factors to keep in mind, but I think the biggest question is like, what are you trying to accomplish with your
Mhm.
team composition, right? Like, yeah, like you could pick every wizard, and wizards have like very strong offensive magic. Um, but if they're all elemental barrage wizards, well, now you don't have a dispel. You really need like a good balance between like what casters like. Yeah, like you can pick all healers, but if the game mode is tap and go respawn, like I don't really need a healer. Like I don't need the respawn. I don't need a revive. I'm just gonna walk and walk back. uh the the duration of the death timer is going to have an influence, what the actual objective is, and what you've picked so far. I mean, like druid has a lot of different enchantments that they just drop on half your team and have huge influence in that way, making a lot of your marshals more valuable, and even making your casters more valuable, because like throwing a gift of air on a wizard, like that's huge. You have a wizard that just won't die and can just keep throwing whatever magic balls or throwing whatever verbals you need them to. um and a bard is a very slept on tool that, again, if you don't have a lot of casters on your team, why are you picking the bard to begin with? Like you need everyone on your team to kind of serve a purpose. Like there's a what is it? Companion planting. If anyone here like gardens, you know that like some plants do a little better when you grow them next to another plant. And this game is a lot like that too. Is you want someone to have like a partner on your team that they can work around. Um. So
So I'm going to step in here
yeah.
a little bit. And first off, I want to start with your statement about bards being tools. And yes, if you did not know this,
Yeah.
bards are tools. That's what you guys are.
I take offense to that.
um, I would say, but I want to expand a little bit. When it comes for me specifically, picking my casters, I'm gonna focus more on where I'm missing somebody. And Rook here made a good statement about what the druid can do. Uh, let's also not forget that a druid could be my pullman. They can take a pull on for me, or they can take a bow, right?
Mhm.
and if they need to, I can put him and my bard on my front line with sword and board. Right, I can have them take different roles and be effective still. Whereas the wizard is probably not going to be right there filling in that, trying to push on and anchor that spot where he's going to be more of a support throwing stuff. I That's what I'm going to be trying to take into account when I personally am drafting.
Yep.
So we have a lot of questions, and I want to make sure we get through them, guys. So let's go ahead and start with myth runs first, which is what are some methods to avoid newer, less experienced players feeling like they are unwanted during a draft? So, um, you guys are both captains of the next mid battle game of the day. Everybody's good and ready. What choices can you make to make that new player who might be on his first Kingdom event feel like he's still important?
That's kind of an easy thing to do. The first and biggest one that you can kind of do to mess with people is that you tell them, like, well, look, man, if most of the time when I'm on the field, if I am not captaining, I'm picked like dead last. So it's a fun little like lightening of the mood. But the big thing that you want to do is that there is no dead weight on a team, and there shouldn't be treated as like an idea of dead weight. These players should think it's like, hey, you have a job on this team, and I can't win this game without you. Even if your job is in there to get mucked up in the meat grinder, that's still work. That's still time, and that's still resources that the opposing team has to deploy to get rid of you. Whether that's like the really annoying assassin who just kind of runs into the back of the team and then catches a banish or catches a tracking or whatever and draws the scouts away and the healers and everyone else. That's less time they have to be healing their allies. That's less time and less resources they have to be dealing with other stuff. And in fact, you can use these kinds of people with the idea, and I'm using the word use with as much care as I can. These people have the kind of job, and just make it clear. It's like, hey, I want to put you in a situation for you to look good on the field and for you to help out with the team. So I need you to help out and work with these or with some other group of people, put them up with a buddy, especially probably a more experienced player, and have those 2 or 3 or 4 work on a side objective. Hey, I need you guys to hold the right flank. Perfect. That person who's the more experienced player there is going to be the anchor to that group. Maybe they play wing. Maybe they're there just to kind of make sure that nothing falls apart. But you give them a job and you make them feel important, even if that job is as simple as holding ground. That's the big thing that I would say helps newer players kind of feel included. And sometimes I just put newer players with me. If I'm playing an armor, my job is normally to just kind of hold a line anyway. So it lets me kind of teach a little bit, lets them feel important because they're contributing to the team, even if there isn't a lot of action. That's still bodies there that the opposing team needs to get through. So that's the way I normally look at it.
Okay, that makes sense. What about you, Rook? Do you got anything to add?
I get a little bit political when I'm drafting in that sense. Like if I want someone to feel good or if I want someone to feel appreciated, like I'll usually pick them first. I mean obviously I know like there's the part of like, oh, but what about picking to win? Like, yeah, like you can find space for it. I mean, if there's like a kid that hasn't been picked and like this is like a young 13, 14-year-old kid, again, like they're asking like, oh, this is their first Kingdom event, like, yeah, like pick them sooner, like make them feel like they're not last pick. And that's something I do more in like at local park. Like I pick people who I like or people who I want to be on my team so that they don't feel like their last pick more than I really do at Kingdom events. Because like if I'm at a Kingdom event, like I don't know, I'm making this whole drive out here and like yeah, I want people to feel included. Like I'm not putting that away. That's not outside of my mind, but that's also like
So I'm gonna
not the
take from that
forefront of my
actually.
mind. Yeah.
I'm going to build off of what you're saying because you've got what I was wanting to say, which is at a local park. I know my players. I know my good ones. I know my new ones. I know those players. Um, at Kingdom, I don't. It's those who I've probably fought with in the past, my park, and then new faces. And there's always new faces. Even they might be people I've met, but they're still new enough that I can't remember. So I would say if I am trying to draft for Kingdom, I'm probably not going to be looking at somebody based upon their experience in the game. I'm going to be looking at that equipment and that skill level that I have already seen. At my park, when it's my duchy just picking people, I'm going to have fun with it. I'm going to pick that new guy, and I've done it. Brand new guy, guess what? I'm a draft for I never draft. I try not to. But if I'm at my park and I have a brand new guy, I'm trying to draft that game. And guess who my first pick is going to be? And it happens
Your
every
new
time that I
guy.
lose him to Sir Balisk. I'll get the new guy, and they get Sir Balisk, and now I go crap. I'm starting way behind. Um, but it's important that while you're trying, just pick the ones at Kingdom for victory. At that kind of event, it's too big of a deal, too many faces. You got to go with the most easy. Park level, uh, that's on you. You should know your players. You should know that you need to be picking the newer kid over the 10-year veteran unless you're trying to win. Let them have fun. Pick for fun, practice instead of victory every time.
Yeah, I
Um,
can see that.
Moving on to the next question, because again we have a lot. Sir Mishka from Sunset Hollow asks, "What do you feel is the fairest way to pick teams to ensure balance between both?" So we're gonna keep this probably more to a park level, because again, at Kingdom, if I'm picking teams, I'm going all victory. At park level,
Yeah.
I'm going more for fun, right? Um, and that's where I think we need to be trying to pick this.
Weirdly
So
enough, I
Rook,
think.
I was gonna say, Sid, you started the last one, so
Yeah, go.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief. Just keep it in order of balance the armor first, balance the experience of players second, and then I think that's really it. If the armor is balanced on both teams, that's sufficient. And then if the experience of the players is balanced after that, then I think you've got a fair game. Um, Even if like the team compositions aren't great, like I think there's still an opportunity to win even with a bad team comp.
Solid
um,
tactics beats comp every time. You go next, Lyle, if anything. I'll go last on
nope,
this.
nope, I'm good. Go ahead.
All right.
I
So,
was gonna say if you have a lot to throw off that's different, then perfect. But I do want to make sure we get through these before like, I don't know what 9:30 tonight.
yeah,
Hmm.
I'm going to try my best. The best way I would say for Ferris, Brooke absolutely hit the nail on the head. There is I'm going to link this to another question that's asked later on because I think this kind of answers it. For from Merc Bottom asks whether or not with how we do our drafts at Kingdom with the pick two, pick one. So meaning one player picks the two players that are up for nomination, and the other player or the other team's captain picks the player that they like, and the other one defaults to the other team. Now, how to discern this kind of way to make the most fair team possible using this system, which in my opinion is probably the one that ensures the most fairness outside of Reeve intervention, is to do what Rook said. First, you separate out the armor, then you separate out the casters, then you put out the marshals and everyone else. If there's any issues and discrepancies for experience, armor values, caster experience, you can handle that afterward with Reeve intervention. Some places actively do very interesting things with it. When we were up at Battlecry last year, one of the games was kind of badly balanced, not in the sense of like because it allowed players to play who they wanted to play with. And then after the first round, they hot balanced and swapped people over between sides to make sure that at least both teams had the ability to kind of play the game out in both halves. So I can kind of understand both methodologies and both like MOs for it. It's making sure that there is a even spread for all skill levels and all kit sets. And then if there is an issue, not balancing for teams, because we're playing out here for having fun. I think the big thing that I kind of differ with between you two on this is that at Kingdom, I'm kind of playing to have a good time. And though I think that might be more because I'm trying to let the next group or the next generation kind of have their fun and like not necessarily picking to have or picking for victory. So I don't know. I think that's more just like difference in philo. I think that's just me. That's kind of the long and short of it on for my end.
Okay. So one of the things he touched on is actually a question that Sir Mishka also had, which is, what do you think should happen if teams are to be found unbalanced? And as Sid said, I agree with as well. We should rebalance those teams as much as possible. If it's a small enough game, if I'm at Sunset Hollow and there's the 5 of us fighting, I don't mind giving an extra point of armor or something, just a free point to the other team or free blessing. But most of the time, you should really try to balance that out. So, I made the conversation earlier of Sir Balisk versus with the brand new day one player. Again, if you don't know who that is, Sir Balisk is a sword knight and probably currently the best fighter we have in the game, or at least the kingdom. I could be biased because he's at my park, but I do see that man all the time, and I've watched him walk through the lines like it's nothing. Um, Against that guy who's day one, right? So if I have Superman here and Clark Kent, who am I going to pick for the fight? Well, balancing wise, we should try to swap those around. If Team A is nothing but Clark Kent's and Team B is Superman, let's give a couple of Clarks to the other team and a couple of Supermen to the other, right? Just to try to balance that out.
The fun part is though is that like dealing with the team of Supermen, realistically speaking, you always don't have that situation happen. But if I've had to do this before, it's a really cool way to kind of like make sure, and it kind of lets the new players learn how to deal with like players who are just incredible. Focus them down. I don't endorse bullying, but if it means making sure that I don't get dived by either Ballast, Chop, Articus, or they just kind of run my entire team through, I'll tell them, hey guys, you see that dude over there? Shift when you see him moving. Do not give him daylight. Do not let him do anything. Because if you do, he's killing you. He's killing all of us. So keep that on like the board. And I think it's one of those things that like for team balance, one thing that you can use to compensate is it's a level of knowledge. It's being good to get him. You point at that guy over there, and you're not going to fight him. You're definitely not fighting him one-on-one. You crowd control him. You chuck ice balls at him. You throw every icy blast, hold person, dispel. You mag dump them. There is no questions asked because if you don't, it's going to get bad real goddamn quick. But that's also something that we can do for balance. Like, hey,
okay, I can't. We're focused on drafting.
Yeah.
I don't want to focus too much on that, but like I understand what you're saying of like, okay, if someone, is like let's call it the MVP on the enemy team, and like that person's the biggest threat, and like we got to do whatever we can to like shut that person down. Like, yeah, I understand we're trying not to lose the game, and like we want to prevent the thing that's going to lose us the game from beating us, which is again whatever that experienced fighter is. But you're also you don't want to throw the whole team against that one person, because then now everyone's just tunnel visioned on one guy. I feel like
bedtime.
you could what oh unmuted Mike. I feel like you
No,
can
my
do
bad,
more
Ty.
with less, right? Like a wizard can kill anyone. Like a wizard has an answer to kill anyone. So like really, you could take out like a really experienced fighter with 2 people, right? One person stays alive, the other person just casts the spell. That person's dead. You don't need the whole team to like in your words, mag dump on one person. But again, I understand the sentiment. I'm just being
It's
nitpicky.
no, it's the correct idea. I'm just saying it because it's one of those things that, and if anybody who's on the field last event saw what Ballast was pulling off, that he was kind of like waiting and hiding out in the back. And I know I'm being hyperbolic. The joke is more to make the idea that you need to keep an eye on that person and you need to deal with them. They are priority one, because if you don't, you will lose. That is not it's not an if then, it is. That is a fact. And that same thing applies with most of our warlords, sword knights, battle knights, etc. You need to deal with that person.
Yeah.
And yeah, it doesn't require the full team to deal with them, but having a contingent of folks dedicated to making sure that that person can't accomplish their goals or is communicative in the way that they do things is a big thing. That's another big thing that you want to keep an eye out when you're drafting folks. Making sure that you have people who can communicate and explain just what is needed. I don't need you telling me every single thing that is going on in a field. Too much information, there's too much going on. Relevant information. Hey, flanker right. Hey, they're coming in or dead right side. We need backup. Just what is relevant. And that's something that you're going to learn to do as you're both captaining teams and drafting teams, is making sure that you're getting people and explaining to the people you pick, even if they're relatively new, what is that relevant information you want to have on hand? What is the kind of stuff that you want to be working on to make sure that your composition is both a success and that you're able to deal with the opposing comp effectively. But,
So I'm going to move us on a little bit here.
Yeah.
Lady Heron, the current rules rep organizer, has asked, do you feel like teams are more balanced when captains are drafting to win, or they're prioritizing even splits? For me, I would say even splits. When that's usually when they're running for fun, and that seems to be the most balanced. What do you guys say?
Yeah, I think that's a self-explanatory. I think
yeah,
if there's
same.
like an even split, I mean, we've had where the Reeve will step in and balance the game. Like, okay, we're gonna have people pick armor first. Okay, this is how the armor is split. You can pick this armor or that armor. Okay, great. Now we're gonna pick the casters. Okay, now you pick that caster, you pick that caster. We got the casters. Okay, now we're gonna pick archers. Like, in whatever order they want. But yeah, I mean, in those cases, we make artificial balancing.
Um,
Not much to say there.
Real quickly, I want to throw this on. You had mentioned rebalancing a little bit and things that can be done there. And it's important to know that when you are picking for what we're talking about right now is drafting to win or drafting for even, if you're drafting to even and have fun, both teams should be happy to give up, whatever player to even that out. As long as you both have the same mindset of we're just here to have fun and have a good fight instead of, well, I would want to mow you over kind of thing.
I'm gonna let one of our guests or one of our audience members, but I guess also probably one of our more prominent battle game guys, kind of chime in real quick. Chop, if you'd like to. You said you wanted to say something.
Can't hear
Yes,
you.
we're good.
Yeah, hey, can you guys hear me?
There we
Yeah,
go.
now I can.
We got you.
Yeah, I'm probably only a good battle gamer. Only probably.
Oh, shut up.
Sir Warlord Sword Knight Chop. Also my coach for the game. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's some things that I just wanted to. I mean, I don't look like I just got in, so I'm new. So forgive me if the context has already been explained. Like when we're balancing teams, one of the things that I think you should think about when you rebalance is what the losing team wants. Sometimes the losing team just wants the game to be over, right? It's a little bit of an ego hit also to be like, hey, let's rebalance and throw your team some extra bonuses. This is why it's so important to make sure before a game starts that things are as balanced as possible, because that solution, hey, let's just give them an extra one. I've never been on a team where getting the extra person feels good to us, even if we end up winning, which usually we still don't. The Kingdom game is pretty, I would say, pretty annoying. So even at Kingdom, I think whoever's running the game, the Reeves, should have a clear idea of like, do they want this to be a fun and goofy game? Then you still kind of want balance. And this is something that Cid and I have been trying to do with like pushing these kind of tournaments, is that by creating a battle game tournament, we create a separate stage where our audience and our fighters and our players are aware that like we're trying to run something at a highly competitive way, right? So we're giving our players a space to kind of go nuts and be meta and be, mag on players and try to stop the rushers. Being someone who oftentimes is the focus of someone like Cookie or someone like Cid or someone like Vince or someone like Rook when I'm on the field, at regular practice days, that level of constant competition, while it's fun for me, if we're all being competitive, if we're not all being competitive and I'm just being shut down, it's pretty toxic. And it's one of the things that makes me kind of not enjoy going out to Sunday parks anymore, is that for me to have fun in the battle game and run around and kill people and backstab, I have to not be the focus of everybody's attention. And if the only way the other team can win is by locking me down and making me so that I can't do anything, I understand the competitiveness of that. It doesn't make it any less fun for me. It doesn't make it any less kind of a toxic. So I just want to kind of give that viewpoint of like the person who's been on the other end. Like I can remember one of the first Kingdom, maybe in the first Neverwinter Kingdom event I went to, and we had a big battle game, and it just so happened that most of Shifting Tides was on the opposite team, and they concocted a very vile plan to basically shut me out of my favorite kind of game, which is capture the flag. And while it was fun and funny and lighthearted, it was also pretty maddening. So that's just my 2 cents.
I am very sorry
Thank you
about
for the
that.
floor.
No, I appreciate it. No, for context, for those of you guys who don't know who Sir Warlord Chop is, he's arguably probably one of our, like, when it comes to the actual like minutia in terms of like theoreticals when it comes to battle gaming, he's probably one of the best guys we've got at it down here at Tides, and probably one of the better ones in Kingdom. So the guy's got a very good eye for the game. He understands the balance for it. So trust me when I say that, like, a lot of this comes with a lot of experience and understanding plenty of different metas that this comes from. And yeah, it is a little bit mean. It is a little bit toxic to do that kind of thing to folks. So yeah, it's one of those things that you should do it responsibly. And yes, I am being a little bit facetious with it. So do with it what you will. Don't be an asshole. The idea here is
more like understanding like the Reeves kind of set the kind of like tone of the battle game, right? So if the battle game is supposed to be highly competitive, have at it, right? But if it's supposed to be just all right, here's some time on a Sunday, we're having fun, like just be aware that like locking down a player and not letting them do anything in battle game does kind of suck for them.
Yep.
At the end of the day, that's it. Thanks.
Other than that, if anything, let's go to the next question, because a lot of that was pretty well like elaborated on between our guys. So the next one
would be Jinx, and that was actually answered. And that's what to do if you have an odd and even number team comp, aka one team having an extra player. Honestly, you just, when it comes to drafting, you go for it. At the end of that should come down to the Reeve when you have 3 choices, right? Or at somebody you can see this is going to be that opposite. Should be the last 3 to 5 players is when you could really see it.
Yep.
And honestly, team that picked first usually gets the extra. Or dependent upon that layout, I might say, well, I tell you what, this guy is probably worth as much as those two. I won't say that out loud. That is very offensive to people, but that is what's in my brain. So I'll take person A, you take person B and C, just to try to even that out. Otherwise, it just falls out to whoever's there. But usually there is a plan to that comes up with right at the end of that.
Yeah, I mean that's something that sometimes will happen at Tides if we have odd teams where we'll try to like figure out splits. Like, well, try to like figure out how to balance armor out to experience, and if numbers in that case, if there's ways to recompense even within the game itself. I remember you mentioned earlier about possibly giving teams like blessing or shorter respawn or something that can kind of balance it. Now, mind you, that assumes that the game is of asymmetry, or if there is a level of asymmetry already baked into it, then the numbers difference doesn't really matter. But for the most part, we assume when we're doing these drafting classes and these kinds of explanations that all things are kept equal and the game is symmetrical in terms of ability. So yeah, I think Lyle answered it pretty well, if not right on the head. Eric, do you think you got anything else to add there?
No, not really. I just see it as, the teams are unbalanced. I mean, that'll happen. Sometimes there's just one more player on the team.
So we'll go to the last one from the pre-recorded questions and then into our newer ones. Fert from Mark Bottom has a question. Our Kingdom events have seen a preference for the pick two, pick one, the system that we've been kind of talking about and mentioning. What's the history behind this method of team drafting? Have previous war teams seen success with other modes of drafting selections? Lyle, do you want to hit this one first, or would you like me? Because we probably have seen enough like differences between war teams in our time.
I don't know what the history is, so I can't really say why it started.
I don't really have much. There's really two ways to do it when it comes to drafting. Ferd, I see you're in chat. So help me if I'm not hitting that. But if there's either I pick one player and then you pick one player, or I pick two players and then you pick one of those and I get the opposite, and then you pick two and I pick one, right? It's the two pick and then I pick one out of the two, one of those two. There's those two ways. That you pick two could be you pick four, and then team B, C, D get to pick in that order before you get the last one. So pick four good fighters. Um, but both of them work. I personally like the pick two, draft two, pick one option, instead of just pick one player that I like best to fill. Because when I pick that way, and I think everybody else will agree with me on, I'm going to pick two sword and boardmen, that are at as close to level as possible, and then my partner, my captain on the opposite team's probably going to pick the one that they like best, and I'll take the other. Whereas if I just select one player at a time, I pick Sir Balisk, and then, oh, you didn't pick Chop, I pick Sir Chop. Oh, you didn't pick Sidolphus. All right, I pick Sidolphus. Oh, you didn't pick that archer, the Battle Master Archer. I'll pick him next, instead of where that way I can choose each one I want, and it will literally almost always be the highest level coming down. Whereas if it's pick two, draft one, or draft two and then pick one, you try to pick for the closest things together, and that does actually hit those new players that we mentioned earlier. It picks because I will pick them for sure at a kingdom. Two newer looking players, same equipment level. Again, I don't know. I might not know who they are, but that guy's got a sword board. That guy's got a sword board. They both have no armor. Cool. Let's pick those two and go from there.
Um, So the interesting part here with this, and I'll answer the first question leading to the next question because I think that's going to give us a really cool dynamic and segue. When it comes to the pick 2, pick 1, traditionally it gives a very good way for skill expression because it allows a team captain to really understand like what I can do to kind of express my ability as a battle master to be. So like for instance, I know what I want in my core. And I understand that, I'm going for my sword and boards and going for my armor. I know like my traditional core value that I want in my team. So this methodology runs with not only that, but it's also good to show skill level for drafting upon the opposing team. So what I mean by that is that it's not just picking in a vacuum. You're not just saying, well, yeah, if you're not picking one guy, if you're not picking one sword knight, I'm getting him. And if you're not picking the battle master, I'm picking him. It's also like, let's say in a situation here, I'm going to make you pick between two people that you probably don't want. Or I'm going to make you pick between people that both of them are required for your composition to work. Because I've been seeing what your composition is doing. Maybe they're going for a really heavy, like caster heavy list, and they need like a battery bard to make sure that they're staying topped off on spells. Maybe I want to force you to have to pick between the two battery bards you need, and that you're only going to end up getting one. Or maybe I'm going to pick one of the candy druids to really force you to have to kind of make a tactical decision that it's not going to be fun for you. And traditionally, I think that this methodology gives a level of skill expression. It kind of ensures a level of skill expression amongst the captains, but it also falls into the trap that if both captains are not understanding that that game is being played, that it can lead to net balance teams, and it forces the Reeve to kind of sit there and play nanny. I've seen other kingdoms do something different. Plenty of kingdoms will just say fight with who you want to, and then we're going to hot balance you folks afterward. The CK does that for Spring War because there's no way you can draft that many people. It's like 150 guys on the field. It's not possible. And I know Keep has had this. I know plenty of Rising Winds events will also do this as well, where you fight with whom you want to, and then they'll put you there, and then they'll hot balance you after the fact to make sure that the game is balanced off the rip, or do it for the second half. There's a lot to it. But to lead that into the second question,
can I add something to
that? Yes, go for it.
Sure. I so from like my experience with the pick 2, opposite person picks the other team leader picks one, and then you get the remaining one, is that it's a good format for when you have a lot of new players that might be leaders, right? Or maybe like you have one leader that's a little bit more experienced than another player. So then this will force, generally the leader, the one who's more experienced, is going to pick people of a relatively equal skill level, and the person with less experience is more likely to pick these things that have less skill level compatible because they just don't know. And so generally, at least it leads to a little bit more balance than the leader picking the person that they want, and then the other person picking somebody that they know, and then the leader picking somebody that they want, right? And then this leads to a very kind of unbalanced situation. For large games, I think the way that CK does, kind of fight who you want, and then we rebalance later, is the way. But I just wanted to interject with that being kind of more or less my big thing on draw 2 or draft 2, pick 1. Is that it helps for generally more balanced when there's a bigger skill gap between the captains. And the other thing it does is it generally also pushes the top picks towards the end, right? Like the odd man out. Generally, like I'm last pick whenever we do draw 2, which then lets newer players be first picks, and it doesn't single them out as kind of like new, unexperienced, or bad players to be picked last. So that's the other kind of positive thing about the draw 2 system for drafting, for overall experience on the field. All right, cool. Thanks.
No, appreciate it. And that's a good insight on it. So one of the last questions we got here, and this one I know Rook is going to have a field day with, coming from Leo. What do you keep in mind when counter drafting? So for counter picks during a draft, well, what's going through your brain?
Go ahead, Rook.
Yeah, I mean, when counter picking, I mean, I can talk more about that on like a class level, but in terms of like the first question is like, okay, like what is the layout of the map? What's the objective of the game mode? So we had one game where it was a bridge battle, and I picked more archers than I normally pick, and I think we had 2 or 3 healers.
Yep.
And then I think we only had 3 or 4 sword and borders. I was one of the great weapon fighters playing paladin, and then I think we had maybe 3 more poles also on the front line. And then for the most part, just a lot more backline, like support, casters, and then any other marshals we had were trying to like go through the river on the sides of the map to try to like play more on the flanks, and just kind of prevent the attacking team from pressing on our side. And my idea with that was just to put all our archers like on the left flank, because now like any sword and borders that they had, I'm literally aiming for where their open side is, right? That's an example of me just trying to like, having more and more martial presence isn't necessarily going to win me that fight, because it's a bridge battle. Like, it's so narrow that you're not going to get as much effect from having a bunch of short range fighter. You need more people who can contribute to the fight from a distance. One of the games that we had, and I was referencing this earlier, where I gave the enemy team all the archers. You can have them. I don't want them, because my goal with my gameplay is I'm going to be giving as many pro as I can on my team. You can do the same thing if you're picking a bunch of monks and letting the enemy team take all the wizards, because now like you can have the casters, because now that's going to be a burden on your team. It's a big question of like, what does the enemy team have and how can I answer them? Elemental Barrage Wizard is a great answer to if the enemy team has like a lot of warriors, or anyone who's heavily armored, because now like Fear of Annihilation is a great answer to them. I think that's something more that you kind of learn through understanding what the different classes do and how they can answer the problems that are on the field. And I kind of get that mostly from playing Wizard. Wizard has an answer to every problem on the field. And so like with that in mind, like it kind of sets the expectation of what I'm looking for in other classes. And like, I know, well, back when Fight After Death was a big issue, my big answer to Barbarian was Lightning Bolt, because it's Flame School, gives them the stopped effect, it shuts down their Fight After Death. If I'm not playing Wizard, I'm gonna look for a Bard who can take Terror, and at least you can terror the Barbarian before they get within range. You're really just going for like how can I answer the problems that the other team is giving me?
So, stepping off of that, he's right. It comes down to, well, what is my problem going to be? As if I've got 20 people coming up and my enemy is picking whoever for casters or wizard warriors or whatever, I need to be making decisions on what they are. If it's a warrior, be honest, I'm not really going to be worried about it, because they're going to be center folk. They're going to be beating each other with a stick. I'll get him another warrior to fight. They can go play. But if they're bringing a polearm or 2 polearms and I don't have any, well, I need to start making a decision there to help argue that back. I can't just count on my shields to push against it. So you have to make decisions on the class as they're walking up. So it's important to know what all the classes are. And again, like Rook said, what they can do. A wizard walking up was one thing, but a wizard walking up with a longsword and a dagger in hand is another.
Yeah.
What do I need to do to counter that? A lot of the time it's going to be, hey, what spell list you got? when they're talking and trying to figure out who to pick, you should be asking, what spell list are you planning to run? So if I'm looking at 2 wizards or even a wizard, and I hear that he's going Elemental Barrage, and he's not mine, he's got picked by the other guy, but I should have listened in and heard he said Elemental Barrage. So how do I counter that? Well, I'll be honest, I'm gonna grab me a healer and say, hey, you got greater release? Yeah, cool. Hit him one time.
Your healers, your bards. Just the idea ends up being, and this is the best part. When you counter picking and drafting, counter drafting is a art form kind of onto its own, included into drafting. It's understanding the threats that the field presents to you. So like what Eric was talking, or what Rook was talking about with the bridge game and a siege, which technically both were kind of sieges, but bridge with a bridge in it kind of adds a little bit of a different wrinkle. But it's understanding what the field presents to you and kind of saying, okay, well, if I'm already going to take a bunch of healers and I'm running enough pros that this isn't going to be a problem, then I don't mind giving that person all the archers they want, because all the people I need to be worried about that are going to catch aggro from the archers are going to sit there and just keep telling them pro, and those archers are going to get very, very mad. And it's going to draw more aggro away, because that'll draw aggro away from the casters, who now have to go over there to try and dispel them. Which those are dispels that they're not using on my golemed up or my persistent void touched assassin I've been sicking on their backline, or my persistent void touched
Barbarian,
anti-paladin or barbarian, or whatever, pick your poison of what nonsense you choose to want to put in. The idea here is that you are forcing these people into bad. You want to force your opponent in, and I speak about this only in the sense of, like, if I'm picking to win and I'm trying to kind of be like hard and play hard on it, I'm going to force you to make a bad decision, because now you can't. Like, the opportunity cost of you not picking this person is going to screw you harder than what would have happened otherwise. So it's one of those things that you're kind of like always trying to balance out, well, how much can I force them to have to pick and kind of pick away from them that doesn't compromise my comp? How much can I compromise in terms of counterpicking, in terms of slots, that doesn't make it that I can't run my original battle plan anymore? One final thing to keep note of when counterpicking is understanding class counterplay. Some of these are a little bit easier to understand than others. So I guess in just using Sappy and Sappy's rules with that in mind, one would expect that something like an assassin could be countered easily by a scout, simply with how tracking works. But in reality, that doesn't really play out as you would expect, given that the scout only has so many trackings to give out in the life, and an assassin has more means of making themselves insubstantial to get out of that situation. Not only that, unless they're making a really bad mistake and they're getting tracked out right in front of their the opposing team, they're always going to have the opportunity to get away. So it's understanding that, yeah, I understand that tracking counters scout or tracking counters assassins, but is it really going to do that? Am I really going to have that in reality? Like, is that assassin smart enough to know that they can kind of play a little bit cheeky and play around those trackings and make the scouts burn them, or the banishes? Or can I pick classes that kind of shore up those defenses, like, for instance, giving them void touch, or making those assassins immune to spirit so they can't be banished? There's a bunch of different ways to do it. The idea ends up being is you're either forcing the opposing team to kind of play into your hand and draft, or force them to play into your hand using the map and the game mode. There's a lot to it, and I think that could be a class unto its own. But that's the simple one. Chop, do you have something to add on?
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback, and it's a question for you three and maybe Leo as well. It's given that we just had a not quite complete, but almost near complete battle game tournament, and given that we ran one also at Shifting Tides, or two at Shifting Tides, we did a 3v3 tourney, we've done a 4v4 tourney. So now that we've kind of run about 5 of these competitive tournaments, I wonder if you guys could talk a little bit about, like, what drafting looks like in kind of these competitive situations where you don't really know what you're going to face until you face it. So you have to kind of draft draft like a team that could almost respond to anything, or I don't know,
Oh,
things that you, in your experience, you find dangerous. But
It's like generalists. Ooh.
I'm gonna start off with and say that I wouldn't call that drafting, to be honest. Um, when you have a tournament set up like that, where you have these pre-planned, you are making decisions and plans long before you even see what's available. I if that is a form of it is a form of drafting, but I don't know if it's one that I would. Uh, I have a lot of experience with because if me, I don't go into those kind of tournaments trying to win. I don't care. Those to me aren't that much fun. Um, I would rather have the two people standing there and a whole bunch of people standing in front of them having to pick and going that way and just having the fun of it. There's a certain level of competitiveness that you get from the other where you start to focus on tournaments where you don't pick the players to have fun. You're picking the players to steamroll. Um, you're trying to get that team that is going to be the most effective every time. Whereas with the most efficient way possible, you're not going to pick walk into that kind of tournament with a peasant it, unless you're just trying to troll and have fun with it. You're not going to have somebody playing a peasant or a single sword uh, kind of thing. You're going to go into that with the wizard single sword casting. Who's ready with multiple spell lists. You're going to go into that with your all right. This is my armored warrior. This is my sword and board warrior. This is my pole arm. Like this person specifically. Uh, I would say the difference between that and what you're talking about, the predetermined tournaments and war game battles, is the level of anonymity. Whereas when you have that large selection that you're picking, your army selection, everybody's more anonymous to each other. Whereas the other, you're picking not for positions, you're picking for player specifically. That's when you're going to have the player who's going to say, "I want my chop, I want my uh, goose, I want my ballast, I want my bolt." Over, I want the sword and board, I want the wizard, I want the polearm, I want the archer.
I mean, it varies. I think that you are correct in the sense that, like, it's more of an argument of team composition, but I can kind of give a little bit of an answer to it, at least for drafting, quote unquote, like when you're trying to make the core, so to speak. It depends on the format. So, like, for our viewers, just to give like a basic understanding, is that each version of this tournament that we have run, between the two we've run at Shifting Tides, or three that we've run at Shifting Tides, and the one that we ran at the day battle of Falling Fire, were all different game modes. One was a ding battle, one was capture the flag, the last one was zone control, 5-zone zone control. Or node battle, whichever term you like to use for it. The difference is that when you're trying to, the thing that you want to keep an eye out is, you want to go kind of generalist, but when it's kind of one of those things that you need to kind of spy the field, you need to kind of do scouting reports. So I'll use this from the context of some of the teams that we know that are in there. First team for Falling Fire, which was Leo, Abremelin, Sir Bolt, Sir Goose, Ezeron, and Ducky. Team is real stick heavy. Got a real good casting core between Leo, Ezeron, and Abremelin. And even Bolt can pick up and play Wizard if you need him to, and he will absolutely do the job. So it's understanding, okay, well, what's something that we know, or how well do we know what these people tend to play? So, okay, let's look through what do these people tend to play most. We know these people well enough because these kind of tournaments attract players that are well known for their prowess on certain classes. They're going to try and main class. They're not going to try and like sandbag and play something off class if it's not something they're comfortable with. So it's like, okay, well, how do we account for that? How do we account for Eli wanting to play Druid? How do we account for having Goose on Anti-Paladin? How do we account for Leo playing Druid or Healer or Wizard? So it's like one of those things that like, well, what are the general things that you're going to have to worry about with the game mode? Dispel is always going to be a premium, so you need at least one caster that's capable of throwing that out and can throw it out with enough sufficiency. So Druid may not always be the answer, but you have a quicker way to do it in succession with Naturalized Magic. If you're willing to play the tempo game, you can go with Healer, which gives you a little bit more sustained utility, because you can always make that, or you can experience that Dispel and kind of account for it and deal with that as it comes. It's more understanding your own core, whether it's play tempo, play rush, play defense, and making that team comp to work around it, and then try to see what the opposing team is going to do to react. But the problem is you're really going to have to like either hard read what the opposing team is going to make or account for it on field. It also depends on the map. Like the map for this last event was very much mid-heavy. It focused on teams and allowed teams that were able to kind of hold space and take space effectively to really kind of run roughshod, because they were able to take both. So for context, it was a diamond with 4 entrances at the cardinal directions, entrances and exits. So the team that was able to hold that mid position could exit out in any one of those angles to get easy flanks, to take to any of the easier points. Yeah, an octagon, I guess.
Yeah, octagon.
Yeah. Look, man, I have a degree that allows me to read, not math.
It's fine. Keep going. Keep going.
Yeah. The joke is still there, but it's one of those things that you need to be able to read the map, read the team, understand what you want to do, and maintain a core, but don't get too lost in the sauce when it comes to counterpicking. Because if you do, then you're not going to have a core that actually makes any sense. Your team is going to have to sit there and be completely reactive. And we aren't robots. Straight up. Even the greatest StarCraft players of all time and the greatest Counter-Strike players, greatest Overwatch players, do not play solely upon reactivity. They have their own comps, they make their own comps, and they play to account for what the opposing team is doing. But they can't account for everything. So it's play your plan, play your game style, and answer the opposing team as best you can. I hope that answers.
Yeah. And I would like to be a devil's advocate for what Lyle was saying, how like, people are just going to pick the best fighters and just pick the, of course there's like a level of, you want the best people on your team, but I think what's most valuable when you have a team that's going to be working together and you have that prep time is you pick people who are working well together. Leo's team, like, you had Goose, you had Bolt, and I get it, they're warlords. Like, you can say like, oh, you're picking the best, but like realistically, Leo's picking people that Leo knows. Like that, those are people you can work well with. That like what they play like because you see them every Sunday. It's easy to form a plan when you already know how the people work. Like when we were forming our team, and again, I was saying this like earlier at the start of the call, it's like, me and Articus working together, like I know how he works. So like it's easier for me to play around whatever he's going to do because I see what he does every Sunday. And this is sort of why like Chop came up with the plan he did, is because Eli and Haru know how to work with each other. They communicate with each other every Sunday. Like they have that type of relationship where it's easy for them to know this is exactly the moment where Haru's going to go in. Eli knows exactly how to support him and like what his weaknesses are. I think having people you synergize well with can be more valuable than just picking people who are just a better player. Like, like having a better player, like maybe it'll increase your chances of winning, but honestly, like if everyone's playing a single player game, then like what's the point of Amtgard? Like you should be having fun with the people around you. I think the game just is more engaging, more fun, and you have a better chance of winning if you are working with people who work well with you.
Yep. Leo, since you were asked this question on behalf of Chop, I kind of want you to get your input in this too.
Yeah.
For context for our viewers, Leo is also one of our high order.
I name dropped you.
Yeah, you were name dropped, invoked even.
Boom.
I've been summoned.
He's been summoned. Right, fire away.
So, like, one of the things that I was keeping in mind for my comp specifically, which originally was just comprised of people in my fighting company, and then also adding in Bolt because he was coming out and I haven't gotten to play with him, and I wanted to play with him, and then also Goose. Yeah, you're bad, Rain, for abandoning my team. Anyways, the main thing that I was keeping in mind for my comp was either A, what are people working on that they want to get to play with more or show off, or like, and then planning around that with what do we need to fill in the gaps there. In this format, since there was the 5, you could take 5 people on the team on the field at a time. You could field up to 2 casters. One of them had to be like a pure support caster, so they couldn't take certain types of spells. It was pretty clear which support casters would be more effective, and we all kind of universally decided, all right, I'm going to be playing a support bard, and then whatever other caster is obviously needs access to dispel magic. And playing around the people that are probably not going to be flexing onto other roles. Like, I was pretty much always going to be on bard because, 1, my weakness is my stick skill, and 2, out of all the other people on my team, putting me on like one of the martial classes and someone else on the support caster would be a little bit of a waste. So then, since I'm pretty much stuck in that role, and then planning around other people in the team, all right, cool. If you're going to be playing, what do you want access to the most? And if you are going to be flexible, what do you want to flex onto? Picking classes for this that work well for multiples of us. Like, for example, my team had a monk, we had a healer, we had access to wizard. None of us played a wizard, but we had access to playing wizard. We had a scout, an anti-paladin, and a barbarian. And most of those classes, with at least the martial classes, most of the people playing those martial classes had the ability to rotate onto a different one if they needed to. So for example, there's at least like 2 to 3 people on my team who know how to play barbarian. We have armor for the people playing the barbarian. So it was a lot of figuring out who's going to be stuck in a specific role and working around them for that specific situation, which I feel like carries over into normal drafting. Like, for example, if I'm picking a team, I know that my strong point is support. So I'm going to want to pick people in to be on my team that will balance out what my weaknesses are, so we are more well-rounded going into a fight.
Yep. That's kind of the long and short of it, at least when it comes to the tourney drafting kind of setup. It was shoring up defenses and playing for what you could. But since it is getting late, we're going to kind of try to wrap this up, and I guess in the easiest way possible. It's the art of drafting is something that you will learn as you play, and it's complicated. Yes, it's daunting because a lot of it does come down to like learning people, learning how they play, learning how the map works, learning how game modes work, interactions. It's a lot, but it's not something you ever have to handle alone, and it's not always something. It's not always something that you're going to have to sit there and think, well, now, like, what do I do? Like, am I completely up a creek here? You're going to have people who are willing to help out. It's something that you can always kind of read up on. Yes, it has a bit of a barrier of entry, but it is something that once you pick it up, it's like riding a bike. You fundamentally have figured it out, and everything else is just small adjustments therein. So it's understanding class interactions, understanding interactions with the game board. So, like, for instance, if you have a pit of fire, understanding that giving pro flame to a player might be a pretty cool idea until you realize that pit of fire also blows up all their equipment. So that anti-paladin with all his armor is now Kaputski. So understanding what you can give to a person and what you can do to shore up any sort of weaknesses that the game imposes on you, whether it be like the game object having like certain conditions, like making a player slow, making a player fragile, suppressing a player, granting you Song of Power while you hold an objective. Any number of things that can occur. It's learning how those things will interact with what you need seeing what you have on the field, seeing who's on the field, and trying to kind of play around what your opposing captain is building. Once you figure that out, yeah, it's daunting. Yeah, it's a lot. But then it just kind of all clicks. And trust me, it is not as hard as it sounds. So with that in mind, any final words from our speakers today? Lyle, would you like to go up first? Because he's still dealing with Ian.
I'm here. When it comes to drafting, you're going to make mistakes. There's no two ways about that. You're going to make mistakes. You're not going to pick the best player for that game probably most of the time for years. Just like the first time you started fighting, you probably lost your first, I don't know, month. Every fight you had, you probably lost unless it was a lucky strike or you somehow walked behind everybody because they forgot you were there and started hitting people. Just like with drafting, you're not going to be good at it. But just like with fighting, just like with learning to read, just like with every lesson in life, stick with it. The more you stick with it, the better you'll get. The better you get, the more mistakes you'll make. And the more mistakes you make, the better you get. It's a circular function that makes you and everybody better.
Yep. Eric?
Yeah, everything we said in the past 2 hours is bullshit, guys. The real answer
God.
to drafting is just pick your friends, pick people you like, have
I
fun.
swear to God.
Don't. It's a game. Just have fun. Like literally. Like, yeah, play with who you want to play with.
True.
Like, yeah, these are the things to keep in mind if you really want to win. But like, you know, more than anything, like this is a game you should have fun with the people you're with.
Agreed. At the end of the day, it is a
I
game.
only try as hard as I do in battle gamings because I want to bully Cid every time I get on the field. That's what makes me have fun.
Man, you killing me.
To be fair,
What
when
was-
Sid
what
is
was
on the
it?
field, you should be bullying him. Just,
Yeah.
get him in melee and just wail on him.
You should be bullying him off the field too, to be fair.
What is wrong with what have I done to deserve this? My lord. With that in mind, I'd like to thank our guests who've come on. Rook, you're wonderful. Love having you here. I'd also like to thank Chop for coming out, giving some really good insights for when he was here, like for the questions that he was here for. If you want to say anything, I see Sid and I walk away. I need to give a pouch. Oh my lord. Thank you very much, Chop, for giving some really good questions. Also for giving some cool insights on drafting, because you definitely actually do have quite a bit like of meat on the bones when it comes to actually like giving insightful conversations and kind of getting people to really think on it. And Leo, you've also kind of shown yourself a lot as probably one of our more prominent like players. Maybe since you don't tend to draft as often, but you understand the game well enough that you can kind of figure like you understand it, even if you don't tend to do it as often as most. So I appreciate all y'all coming out. I appreciate everyone who's here in the audience, and for those of you listening at home, drop comments, concerns, expletives you'd like to chuck at our runners. Oh.
I'm gonna link a couple videos that are from completely unrelated video games. One from Overwatch, one from Helldivers, that really kind of summarize how I feel about tactics, strategy, and team dynamics.
Yep.
But I'll put that in the Battlemaster chat, and you guys can check it out.
Thank you guys so much for coming out today. I really appreciate it. It means the world to us to have so many members of the Neverwinter community, and even those from abroad coming in to listen in, and those of you listening at home. This is a labor of love. These guys don't do this out of the goodness of their hearts. They do it because they want to have better people to fight against. So,
Yeah.
All right, everyone.
Without further ado,
Thank you for your
guys.
time.
Yep.
Have a great night. See you on the battlefield.
Yep. See y'all out there.